Episode 2 of the NFL Draft mini series. Welcome in Angelo Carriero and Jimmy joining you today because we've got so much more to talk about when it comes to the NFL draft landscape for this 2025 NFL draft. We're recording at 8:15 on Tuesday or Monday, excuse me, April 14th, 2025. We did the quarterbacks in the last episode of this series. I had Cam Ward as my number one quarterback. Jimmy had Cam Ward as his number two quarterback. And then we deviated hard. Neither of us having Shedeur Sanders as our number two. Jimmy went with the uber athletic in terms of arm strength and running the ball, Jackson Dart. I went with Will Howard. I'm regretting that.
Stay strong. Stay
I'm having a
strong.
little bit of buyer's remorse from yesterday, Jimmy. I got to say that one is still going to be one that I learn from, just in terms of if he needs to pop off the tape or if flashes, and which one of those. If I had to go back and do it, I would honestly like to just not have a QB2 and just have like a QB 2A, 2B, 2C, 2D, but all of them be 2A, so I don't actually have to rank them. But that's the fun about doing a NFL draft show when you're going and you're ranking and you're trying. Most of the time, the NFL draft and scouting, and what I love to do most is about competing against yourself. So you're able to compete against yourself, and you do two things: you either win or you learn. There's no losing, except for real life GMs that have their jobs on the line with this
Yeah,
type of stuff. But
yeah.
Jimmy, we are going to be talking about running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends on today's show. And I'm not going to get to everybody, all of your sleepers or anybody out there that you're pounding the table for. I've only had a limited time to scout the players that I have been able to. This has been a late start in my process, but I still wanted to come here, get this recorded, and for Jimmy and I to get this up and running and at least get some type of stamp on the NFL draft season of 2025. So, without further ado, Jimmy, do you have any comments? What do you think as a whole before we get into the specifics? What do you think about the skill position class of 2025 before we get into the nitty gritty?
I really love the running backs and tight ends. I like a few of the receivers. It's just compared to last year's class, this year is a bit of a dud, which I hate to say it because, like I said, I do like some of the guys in this class, and I do think there's going to be some impact receivers in this draft. But the strength and the depth of this draft, I feel like, at least from the skill position, is definitely in the running back room. I mean, the more you look at it, it's like there's 10 guys that could legitimately come in and be producers this year in the league.
I think so too. I think the running back position is as deep as we've had it. Jimmy, I know that we like to talk about old drafts like we like to do. The one that's been talked about a ton coming into this one is the 2017 NFL draft in terms of running back. That was your Leonard Fournettes, your Christian McCaffrey, your Dalvin Cook, your Joe Mixon, like that ilk of running back. Jimmy, we go back even further. It reminds me of 2008 when you had Darren McFadden, you had Chris Johnson, you had Jonathan Stewart, you had there was a running back in the third. I just had it and it just escaped me. But that 2008 running back class was absolutely loaded. I think we had like eight, maybe starters to Pro Bowlers from that class. And this running back class seems to be shaping up very similarly. And at the very top of it, I think that you look no further than the guy that everybody's talked about already. He's someone that I really wanted to zag when everybody was zigging, but I had no choice but to put him as my number one running back and one of the top five prospects in this year's class. His name, of course, is Ashton Jeanty, the running back out of Boise State at 5'8", 210, I believe 210 pounds. I know you saw that video from a couple weeks ago where he was just carved out of granite, essentially,
Yeah,
at
yeah.
his pro day. I came in and I'll tell you a little bit of my running back. I won't say philosophy, but a prototype and why Genty at first was really hard for me to pin down. We talk about old draft classes, and 2007 produced what I think is the best running back prospect of my NFL draft lifetime, and Adrian Peterson. when you had a running back that was 6'2", 220 pounds, that was a physical runner who just happened to have 4.3 speed, a guy that won an NFL MVP, was a 2,000-yard rusher, and owns the single game rushing yard mark. I think that he lived up to all of the hype, if not just even a little bit more as well. I think Adrian Peterson's one of the greatest running backs of all time, if not being in the conversation for the best. And I know that old heads would say one thing or another, but I mean, if you put Adrian Peterson in any era, I think he's successful. And the reason why I have such a hard time with Genty is because if I'm going to put a running back as my number one overall player, or my running back as a guy that I think you can draft and build your team around, I want them to be big, strong, fast, and ultra talented, like all those things. And it's so hard as we get into this running back class. There's one running back specifically that I'll get into that I had a little bit of problem in this area. But Ashton Genty, he's just undeniable when you put on the tape, because I didn't think he was very fast from what I had seen in the games where I had checked in on Genty, but he does have enough speed. He ran away from enough people to where I'm not really worried about Genty. I don't think anybody will ever confuse him for a burner, but I do think that Genty is a guy that you don't have to worry about always getting caught from behind or not having enough to make an explosive play. I thought that Genty, just in terms of, there were games where I clued in and his offensive line was struggling, and I thought that he didn't really help that offensive line out. And these were some of the worries I had. But as I dove into the tape of Ashton Genty, he kept taking those off the table. Each and every concern that I had, he took off the table, and he ends up coming in. I want to say that, I don't want to finalize anything now, but he's my number 4 overall player in this class. And I think that if you took position out of it, he'd be in that competition in the top 3, in my opinion, for how good he is. I would go short, and this is no pun intended for his 5'8" frame. I would go short of calling him a an elite, like, generational back. I don't think that
Yeah.
he's that. I think that if you were to tier it and you said, hey, I think this guy is a Hall of Fame running back, I would not put Genty in that. Like Adrian Peterson, I would put that in. And to be quite honest, I don't know if you could put any other running back prospect that has come out since him in that tier. I know a lot of people liked Ezekiel Elliott. I wasn't on board with that. I actually had Derrick Henry as the number 1 running back in that class, and I still feel very vindicated for sticking with him through all
Yeah.
those years. Yeah, exactly. With
Yeah.
with Derrick Henry, it was a good call, don't you think?
Yeah. I think it's safe to say now, I think the jury's out. I think Derrick Henry has been more successful than Zeke. Now, Zeke had a couple good years,
Now
but
Zeke
I
started off
mean,
like, you can't take away Zeke's start that he had, because he was
yeah.
very dominant. But I would say that Saquon Barkley was a guy that people thought was that elite running back in that tier. I think that the running backs that have come out, Bijan Robinson got a lot of hype. I hyped up Leonard Fournette a lot. He was a guy that I was really
Yeah.
into. I learned a little bit from Leonard Fournette, not a ton, but I did learn a little bit from him, because I just saw someone that was 6'2", 230 pounds, that was an elite high school player, elite college player, fast, strong, all of that. Leonard Fournette's story might have been written by him. I don't know. And I'm trying to think if there's anybody else. Would you throw anybody else's hat in the ring with those guys? I mean, I love Todd Gurley coming out, but I didn't think he was an elite running back. I think he was more in this Genty tier of running backs. I would
Yeah.
take I would take Gurley over, but it's really something to say because Genty has won me over so much. Where would you have where would you rank the running backs before this year? And then before I continue on to what I love most about Ashton Genty, where would you put him more in an all-time ranking before we get him
Yeah.
into this draft class?
And I feel like just going off of like say the last 10 years, it's hard to think because there really hasn't been that many running backs drafted high. And that's what you would go off of, like the guys that were slated to go high, not the guys that have ended up great. But yeah, you've got Bijan, you've got Jameer Gibbs, but even like Jameer Gibbs wasn't that highly touted coming out of Alabama. Obviously he's
Ooh, I
talented. He
will
was
say, I
taken
will
in the top
say,
15.
I did have Jameer Gibbs over Bijan Robinson. That was a take I did have. And we may get to that at some point of the way I prefer running backs. It's almost like the quarterback conversation that we had yesterday. It's how I prefer
Yeah.
certain modern day players, but we'll get to that later. Continue. I just wanted to say I'll raise my hand. I actually had Gibbs over Robinson in that draft.
Yeah. And I feel like that too. That's why it's different case to case and draft analyst or scout to scout. Some scouts might like bigger receivers and not like the smaller, shiftier receivers. So in them, they might have, guys, slotted differently. But I would put Genty, I don't think he's coming out of college. Like I would put Saquon above him. I might even say coming out of college. No, I would put him over Leonard Fournette. Not sure about Bijan because Bijan was real impressive a couple of years ago coming out of Texas. But again, a different style. He's more of that shiftier guy. He has power, but he's more of the crazy athlete than Genty is. But I would put Genty in the top five, nowhere near, like you said, not that like lock it in the Hall of Fame. But I would put Genty in that realm of like I expect him to make 3 to 4 Pro Bowls in the next 6, 7 years.
Do you think that
Put him in
Genty?
that level.
Oh no, I agree. Do you think Genty is what we thought Trent Richardson would be?
Yes, and that's actually a thought that I had about Genty. Not based on how they play, but just their build. I feel like they're similar. I mean, you looked at Trent Richardson; he was just a brick house when you see him, and Genty's a similar way. And what got Trent Richardson, he just lost all the vision when he got to the league. It's like he forgot how to play running back, and then it makes you think like, well, was it just that he was in college in Alabama behind the best offensive line, and he could just run through like Moses part of the Red Sea for it's one of those things. But I feel like Trent Richardson is a good comparison, and I think that's a good comp to say he is what we hoped Trent Richardson will be in the league.
And Trent Richardson was in that thought range of being that type of elite running back coming out, and especially when the running back bubble, really popped in 2005. But when you go on in terms of running backs being picked highly, I think it took another 5 years until Saquon came off the board. And getting to a situation like Ashton Genty, if, like I said, if you're going to different tiers. I don't have a ranking right now. It'd be fun to have that exercise of where I would rank players. He's not in that tier one of running back prospect for me. In this draft, he easily is. Like I said, he's a top 5 player in
Yeah.
this draft, no questions about it. I'm talking about if I was to make like all time tiers, I think he's actually tier two. And that is really saying something coming from someone that wanted to doubt him. And the number one reason why, Jimmy, is because Ashton Genty has the best body contact control and break tackle that I've ever seen. That I have ever seen in terms of when he gets hit or has contact initiated. It is so stark compared to any other running back prospect that I've watched in terms of breaking tackles at his size. And it's not only with pure power. In fact, I would say that the most interesting thing about Genty, even though he is 5'8", even though he's 210 pounds and he's built like a brick house like Trent Richardson was, is that people slip off of Ashton. And I think that that is a credit to his shiftiness, to his overall athleticism, his short area quickness, and how strong he is to be able to platform left to right, which I saw on tape as well. His ability to break tackles in the hole because of his ability to plant his left or right foot and bounce out and then get to the perimeter. I was so impressed with that ability. And there was just something special about him where I was watching one of the tapes and they had the backup running back in, and it was like the first game of the season against a lesser opponent. I think it might have been an opponent down south, but yeah, they were running this backup about 2 plays and the backup wasn't getting anywhere. And I even thought to myself, this is when I just very first started coming around on him. I said, if you put Ashton in, he's going to get in the end zone. And didn't you know at the next play, they put him in and he waltzed into the end zone. Ashton Genty
Yeah.
is a special football player. I would go just short, and this is what I mean by my tiers. I would go just short of saying, because I think he could be a quote unquote franchise running back, but I don't think he's going to be an elite running back. I think, let me try to scale this back as best I can. I don't think he's an all time running back. I think he can be an elite
Yeah.
running back for his era. I do think that that is very possible, but I don't think he's going to get into the I would say this. I don't think that he couldn't get to it because that's how impressed I've been with Genty. I would say that it's not likely that he's in that conversation with like Eric Dickerson, Adrian Peterson, Barry Sanders. But I do think that if you
Yeah.
start talking about the molds one day of a Jim Brown, an Emmitt Smith, even a LaDainian Tomlinson, a guy like that, more of those stocky power running backs that had a little bit of speed, then maybe Genty's name will Marshawn Lynch, like in that type of echelon of running back. And I know that Jim Brown's one of the greatest of all time, but I'm just saying, that's kind of where I have Genty in my overall
Hmm.
picture. He's a guy that I doubted, but I'm kind of in love with the guy now. I thought he was sensational.
Yeah, I think he's one that coming into the season, like he wasn't the number one prospect. Everyone was all over Ollie Gordon going into the
Yep.
year. He was the consensus number one, and maybe we can touch on him, but he is one that he has disappeared. I mean, it's one of those you got to look like, is he still in the draft process? Like, is he going to go to a team because no one's talking about him? But he was the solidified number one guy, and then Genty kind of came out of nowhere. Not if you watch a lot of Boise State, obviously you knew who Ashton Genty was, but most people were not having Genty projected to the top 10 of the draft this year. But I'm curious how close Genty is to your number two guy. I assume I know who the number two guy is, but I'm curious how close you have him because the talk most of the year is it's just Ashton Genty and then everyone else. But I think it's gotten closer as the draft has gotten,
No, you'll be
approaching.
surprised. You'll be surprised. And I'm not gonna
Okay.
save it. I'm just gonna go into the number two guy when we get there. But unfortunately, I've got another curveball to throw your way. But before we wrap up on Ashton Genty, the point that I really want to get to in terms of him is, and what I said with the elite running back tier is just that I would not draft Ashton Genty if he was going to be the number one player on my offense. That I don't think is going to be conducive to winning a Super Bowl. And that's why I thought Adrian Peterson, like he was so uniquely special that I said, hey, this guy is the best athlete on the field. I think that you could put him as your best player on offense and win a Super Bowl. Didn't happen. And that's just the modern day NFL. So if you're, in my opinion, if you're Las Vegas, I think it would be kind of I get that they're trying to win now, and I don't think that Ashton Genty would be bad in Las Vegas. In fact, I think he would be very good. But if you're trying to build this team to win a Super Bowl, I just don't think that your identity should be, hey, we're going to put this guy at running back. We're going to run him 25 times a game, 30 touches like McCaffrey in Carolina, and we're going to win the Super Bowl with this method, even if we don't have a lot around him. I know that the popular thing since the draft process started is to put him in Dallas, Texas with the star on his helmet, but there
Oh
is
yeah.
not a place that I think would be better suited for Ashton Genty to go to than the Dallas Cowboys. You get a team that has made their bread and butter with their high flying passing attack under Mike McCarthy, and you build it around Dak and CD Lamb being the engine to your team. But we have seen that when it fails, they don't have a secondary option on offense. I think Ashton Genty is so good that he is someone when the times get lean that you can lean on him. And then once you're ready to come out of it, then you end the game with Dak to CD. And that's the type of team that I think he would have the most success with in a team concept. In terms of if you draft this guy, if we can't draft running backs because they don't win you Super Bowls. Well, they can if they're in the right spot. So that's my take on Ashton Genty. I will give you my draft range and then we can talk about like where you have him and your thoughts on my take there. But I would consider drafting Ashton Genty again, team specific. I would start at number 4. I think that you go Cam Ward, Abdul Carter, Travis Hunter. I think those three guys are equally as special of football players as Ashton Genty, maybe some in different ways. So just for positional value and just what I said there, I would start the market at 4 for Ashton Genty in this draft and would feel amazing about it because of how good I think he is. I think the other 3 just give you positional plus talent value that you can't pass up. So Genty at number 4, I would start and be completely happy with that.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, like you said with Oakland or with Vegas, like Josh Jacobs was there a couple years ago. I feel like that's a close comp. Like, would Ashton Genty going there be that much of a difference than when you had Josh Jacobs, a similar bruising type running back, tough to tackle Josh Jacobs? I think Genty's a better prospect than Jacobs, but they're similar enough to where, like you said, if he's your focal point of the offense, you're not going to do much. But you take him to a Dallas. So yeah, if I was a team in the top 10, like you said, starting about 4 or 5, I would be comfortable taking him there. I would not be surprised if he goes to the Raiders. But I feel like going to Dallas would be the best fit for him, and he could go in right away. And you think of him, and then Rico Dowdle was still there last year. Rico Dowdle's a good running back, and he's a different type of running back than Ashton Genty would be. So I feel like they would be a good complement for each other, and that's what teams are doing now. They're finding the Sonic and the Hedgehog, what they've
Well, I
got with
think Dowdle
Montgomery and
left.
Gibbs in Detroit. Oh, is he not there
I think he
anymore?
did. I can't remember where he went, but I think that he's no longer a Cowboy. I could be wrong. I'm not afraid of that, but I think that the Cowboys have signed a couple running backs recently that are more. Maybe they got Miles Sanders or something,
No,
or
he is. Yeah, he is. He's with the Panthers now.
Dowdle
So
is
yeah, that makes even more
even
sense. But
more.
yeah, I think
Yeah.
adding him to the Cowboys with all the other weapons, as you said, as more of a complement instead of the main course of your offense, because that's just there's a very small handful of guys you could do that. Derrick Henry, and you could even argue he may not. Yeah, I mean, you've got Lamar, but like Saquon in Philly, he's the most talented player on their offense, in my opinion, and it works. But there's not, you can't do that, especially with a rookie coming in. You need pieces around him, and the Cowboys' offense is already great.
Yep. And so where would you so do you agree that he is not a running back that can win you a Super Bowl as your best player on offense? Like how could he be the
Yeah,
okay. And then do you think that where would his range start for you?
I think putting him. I don't know if I would take him so much as 4. I think where I would start is where the Raiders is at 8 or 9, wherever the Raiders are.
6. Yeah.
That's where I
Hmm.
would put his. Okay, then 6. Yeah, that's where I would be the most comfortable taking him. Would be starting at 6, and then really wherever from there. But I would put his cap at 6.
Well, that I think that's one of the first ones where I actually was higher on a player than you, and I know that there's going to be one coming up at my number 3 running back because my number 2 running back in this class is Travion Henderson, running back out of Ohio
Mm,
State, because I watched him, and we'll hit on Omarion Hampton in a second because I think that's the name that we're both thinking there at that number 2
yeah,
spot. But before we get to Omarion, I watched Travion Henderson, and I came in kind of I know he had been kind of banged up in prior years, and they brought in Quinshawn Judkins, and the thought and feeling with Travion Henderson, and even the proof this year is that there was a bit of a timeshare. Some people kind of want to stamp him as a timeshare running back, but I truly thought that when I watched him, he was my no brainer number 2 running back. And I thought he was so good in the tape that I watched, Jimmy, that I would make him a first round pick. Like I wouldn't pick him in the top 10 per se, but in terms of best football players that I've watched in this class, it would be hard for me. I could probably do it if I pinched a couple guys in, but it would be hard for me to just find 10 football players that were better than Travion Henderson on a snap to snap basis in terms of just simply the one thing I loved about Travion most is he is absolutely tenacious. Jimmy. Like he is a physical, violent runner and he loves to dole out that contact. He loves to go and make an aggressive, a sharp stiff arm into the chest of a defender. He gets on the perimeter and his speed, of course, is what people want to talk about. But I think it's more of the punishment that he delivers once he's out on that perimeter that also helps him break open and get these long runs for touchdowns. Obviously, he's very fast. I don't think he's an elite burner like maybe his timing for a running back would say, but I do think that he is like if you rated a speed scale, 4 out of 5 is fine. Like he's not a 5 out of 5 in my opinion,
yeah.
but a 4 out of 5, perfectly happy with that. I thought that in terms of just the overall package and what he brought, like he really cared. You could show how much he cared, and I thought he could really catch the football. And all of those things together, it really reminds me this top 2 because we had mentioned some players before. I think it really reminds me of Bijan and Gibbs in certain ways. The
Hmm.
only difference is when I had Gibbs above Bijan, the reason why I had that is because I really value more in the modern day what I call 2D running backs over 3D running backs. And what I mean by that is that I thought Bijan Robinson was very good in small spaces. He was able to make people miss and break tackles when they were around him in his area, and I thought that made him a very special running back, but that's a skill that I thought is more valuable in 2000 in the 2000s or the 1990s, like that type of running back, to where, hey, we're going to hand you the ball, you're going to have to break these tackles, and then eventually he'd be fast enough to outrun the defense. I thought Bijan was pretty fast, but I didn't think he had elite speed. Where on the inverse, I thought Jameer Gibbs was a perfect 2D player. And what by 2D, I just mean on a graph, you're horizontal and you're vertical. I thought he was very good, very fast in short spaces, going horizontal and down the field. He was the fastest running back in his draft class. He's one of the fastest running backs in the NFL. I thought a lot like Travion Henderson, he played very violent for the running back position. Gibbs is not afraid to hurt you, and with that speed, he'll hurt you, and then you'll be on the ground watching him go into the end zone with how fast he was. I just thought that his speed plus his physicality was better than what Bijan brought to you in the modern day NFL. You put this 15, 20 years ago, I would have had Bijan number one easy, right? But
Yeah.
that's how I viewed that. But the reason why I haven't flopped here is because I actually think Ashton Genty's better than Bijan Robinson in terms of the tape. I like that Bijan was bigger. I like that Bijan was just kind of the Adonis that he was as well. But I just think that Ashton Genty had more special qualities, and kind of the same with Travion Jameer Gibbs. I think they're very similar in running backs. In fact, if Detroit didn't have Jameer Gibbs, Henderson would be perfect. I just think Gibbs is a little faster, and I like that Gibbs was a little more athletic in short areas. So that's why I kind of have him flip flop this year. I have Genty as a top 5 player. I have Travion Henderson as a top 15 player. I would feel comfortable taking him if I needed a running back or needed an identity to my game. Like, I mean, if we're talking about the Lions thing, Jimmy, and how well Jameer Gibbs fit there, Chicago already has DeAndre Swift, and I know that DeAndre Swift is more of an elusive running back, but he's gotten bigger as he's in the NFL. Everybody's talking about Hampton at 10. What about getting Travion Henderson at 10 and making him the Jameer Gibbs of the offense and really breaking it open? Probably a little too early, probably a little bit of a luxury pick at that point for the Chicago Bears, but running back's been linked to them. I would take Travion Henderson, like I said, top 15, definitely in that 11 to 20 range if I needed a running back. And even if I didn't need a running back and I was in the 20s and he was the best player on my board, I would have no problem taking him at that spot, even without a running back need. I really like Travion Henderson when I watched him on tape.
Yeah, and another thing that he has going for him, especially going to the league, is pass blocking. He's great in the passing game. He's not afraid. Like you said, you can tell he cares. He's physical. He wants to attack you. And he shows that in the passing game, too. And going to the NFL, that's one thing that the young guys coming in, if you can't do it, you're automatically off the field. And that's why so many teams have to have a committee kind of approach to the backfield. They have the veteran that they can come in and trust on third down. But he seems that he can do that already. He showed it in college. But I think I have him number 3. So, but it's very close. I have Genty up here, and then the rest of the guys are kind of all like this, to where it's like they're jumbled together. But I have him as a close 3 behind Omari and Hampton, who I have at number 2. But I'm not dead set on Hampton being 2 and Henderson 3. Whereas like with Genty, he's far and away the
Right.
number 1. But the rest of these guys, like the more I watch Henderson and the more that I see what he can do in the receiving game too. I'm close to moving him to 2, but I would put that threshold for that next group of guys I have as the second half of the first round. But I don't know from there if I could specifically say who I have above him. But I feel like they're all in that 15 to 32 range. I feel like they could all go there, and it wouldn't really be that much of a stretch.
Okay, so 15 is the ceiling you would have for Travion, and then you would have the 32. He's a first rounder to you as well, is what you're saying.
Yeah, yeah, I think so.
Yep, I agree with that. And then let's get to the number 3 running back on my board, the number 2 running back on your list. I have Omarion Hampton there, and Omarion Hampton is a guy that I had heard enough about that I was very intrigued. When you talk about a 6'2", 220-pound running back that ran a 4.46 at the NFL Combine, and a guy with his statistical production at North Carolina, it really catches my attention. And he was a guy that originally I thought I would have over Ashton Genty, because I love that profile so much out of a running back. Because I often say that I need my running backs, like when I really like them, is that they need to be powerful, strong, with just enough speed. And what I mean by, excuse me, I think I even messed that up. if I could rewind that, it would be that they have the power and size with just enough speed, or they have the speed with enough power in them to really make me get above into that first round threshold. And the thing with Omarion is that he does have like enough power. He does have enough speed. He does have the size. So why don't I love him in the way that I like Gentier, I like Travion Henderson? The thing with Omarion Hampton is that frankly, I thought when I turned on and watched enough of him is that I think he's actually a pretty average football player. And that can sound a little harsh, but I'm just telling you what I saw is that in terms of talent, like, yes, he has the athleticism and yes, he has the build. You have everything there. But when you watched him, I thought that he was a little laboring going in and out of the backfield, like when he needed to make cuts upfield, even when he was in space. For as many broken tackles as he had at North Carolina, like I know that he led the NCAA not last year but 2 years ago in yards after contact. The thing with Omarion is, at least in 2024, it seemed like he often went down on the first contact that he received. So I didn't really get to see that break tackle running back. Now, granted, I thought he got a lot better as the year went on, especially if you turn on the tape against Florida State. I thought that he had a tremendous game. So I don't want to say that Omarion is without good tape, but I thought that too many times than not, and especially earlier in the year, he just went down too easy. He didn't seem like he had a ton of instincts. Jimmy, to be honest, it looked like a guy that you would recruit it like in high school. You would be like, you look like you'd be a great athlete. You've ever played football? The kid says nope. And it's like, okay, we'll put you at running back. Just take the ball and beat up everyone. And he can. Like, that's kind
Yeah.
of what I saw out of Omarion. I didn't see that nuanced running back skill that I see out of a Travion, the skill that I see out of Ashton Genty. The one trait that I do like about him the most, which is also what worried me, is that I think his best quality is falling forward when he gets tackled. And I know that doesn't sound great. And to be honest, sorry, I break this. To be honest, I think that you look back at a running back like Edger and James, who I obviously was a lot more talented than Omarion Hampton. But the thing that they always said about him is that he could run for, he would always fall forward. Like, he'd always get you that extra yard or two because he knew how to fall forward. So that really is a skill that you have to have. And to me, I think Omarion Hampton has that. But outside of that, I saw a running back that is pretty fast, but not a blazer. I found a strong running back that got tackled early too many times. And I saw a running back that didn't have a ton of those football instincts and kind of laboring on his cuts. He's just a guy that I wouldn't take in the first round. He may be a guy that if you give him enough carries, you'll get the juice out of your squeeze. But unless you're at the very end of the first round and he's the guy that's separating you from a Super Bowl run because you just need a body like that back there, I would wait until the second round to take Omarion Hampton.
I think something too that helps him is, like you said, he doesn't have that one trait that absolutely jumps off the tape at you when you're watching him. Or like in Ashton Gent, you look like he's impossible to bring down. He can't, you're never going to get him with one guy, probably not even two guys. But with Hampton, he has everything kind of collectively together where he has the size, he has enough speed. Kind of what you say, he has enough speed, he has enough of everything that I think that's what the scouts will look at and say, okay, he has everything. He produced out in the ACC. It was a pretty good conference. He went up against good competition. It's not like he's a low level guy, and he showed that he can do it. And he's versatile in the pass game. He had 33 catches last year. Needs some improvement in the pass blocking game, but I feel like because he has that prototypical size and speed, he's going to be a guy that teams look at and say, okay, I think we can mold him into whatever we need him to be. And he seems like he's game enough. And like you said, it may not sound like a compliment, almost like a backhanded compliment, but that he falls forward. But there's a lot of running backs in the league that don't do that. And that is a perk that when you get to the league, you can last for a long time if you, at the very least, you're big, you're going forward, and you're finishing forward. You're not finishing side to side or back.
So your range starts where, because you had Omarion ahead of Travion. I know you said 15 to 32, but you have Omarion ahead of Travion. Where are you in that terms of Omarion in the draft if in reality, like GM, if you're a GM, do you take him to Chicago? Like if Genty went shocked and went fifth, I know you didn't have him in the same place. Does Las Vegas take him? Do you go like where would you take it?
See, I wouldn't go up to Vegas with Hampton just because I feel like he's not, the rest of the guys aren't that explosive playmaker that would be worth a top 10 pick even. But I think once you get to that 15 range, like the Cowboys, if they needed somebody and they want to go running back in the first round, I do feel like it would be a bit of a stretch. And this is where, when you talk about these out loud, you kind of get into arguments with yourself and you're like, well, you have these rankings, but the more that you talk about it, it's like I do kind of like Henderson more than Hampton, but I feel like the measurables where you look at them, Hampton is a little bit better. He's got a little bit better size than Henderson does, but I would still put him in that range. I guess I would put him just a tick below Travion Henderson, whereas say I'm at 17. If Henderson and Hampton are there, I would take Henderson. Like I was just doing this mental workout as we're going, and it's like but I would still put Hampton with a first round grade. I would just put him maybe say more mid 20s than I would the 15 to 20 range.
Yeah, I know a popular destination for him as well would be number 20 to Denver. There's a lot of talk like that.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's a pretty decent pass protector. A lot of his catches, I think he had some fine outside catches, but it was a lot of them were in this little slip action they like to do where they would get him just under the offensive line and they would do a screen essentially with him behind the center and the guards and kind of let him break
Mm-hmm.
open to the field. Yeah, I like I said, if you absolutely need a running back, and sometimes guys like him do better at the NFL level just because it is a size speed type of thing. But
Yeah.
I would, like I said, I would wait till the second round if possible, the very, very end of the first maybe. But he's more of a second round guy to me, as is my next running back. And the last one I think I'll get to ranking, and then we'll go into some other names. But Quinshon Judkins is a guy that I actually really wanted to take a good look at, especially after the college football playoff and then his combine. I really wish I would have seen some of the Ole Miss stuff because the Ohio State tape, I was really underwhelmed for a majority of it until the Michigan game, the one where Will Howard got knocked out and they lost. From that game on, and especially the Michigan tape, I was really impressed by Quinshon. And he showed me the type of guy that we all thought he could. I mean, everybody remembers when NCAA 25 dropped and he had the OP
That
spin
spin
move.
move.
That was absolutely ludicrous. Uh,
Which I feel like he got more attention this year than Travion Henderson because of that. It's just a video game, but he had so much attention early in the year that it was like he's a starter. Travion Henderson's
yeah,
just
well, he was
there.
the he
I
was the
feel like it was
most
kind of the
notable
look.
player from the game. Like that spin
Yeah,
move on TikTok made like I knew that Quinshon Judkins was the best player in NCAA football 25, the video
yeah,
game, because of
yeah.
that spin move.
And that's a real thing. It sounds stupid to talk about on like a legit draft, like we're talking about real
Yeah.
prospects, not a video game. But the social media talking the hype, like just for like casual fans watching, like that, they're more focused on Judkins as opposed to Henderson. They're thinking Judkins is the speedster, and Henderson, well, if they have two of them, he must be the power guy. And it's like, no, that's not the case. Well, Henderson didn't have that spin move on NCAA. What's going on?
Yeah.
But I think the way he finished last year was one of the most impressive stretches that you'll see.
I think Judkins, he was a guy. The reason why I was lower on him, especially before the Michigan game, it seemed like when he broke out, he wasn't as fast as you'd hope for. I think even there was something that I listened to where Lane Kiffin even thought that speed, like long speed, was really his biggest issue, and he proved at the combine. I mean, he tested kind of out of the water for the position. And even I thought some of his strength, like he went down a little too often for me. I think what really spoiled me is after watching Ashton Genty and why I said that like he has like OP GOAT, like best break tackle in terms of, I think I said contact balance was like he had the most elite contact balance. And that's true. I don't know about pure breaking tackles, but I would put him up there in that God tier class of like Ashton Genty is the most elite contact balance player in his own class that I've ever seen. That's how impressed I was with Genty. So maybe when I watch Hampton and I watch Judkins, it's comparing a god to mortals. It's really unfair to the other guys. but I didn't think that he always broke the tackles I thought he could have, especially for his size and pedigree. But once we got to the Michigan game, once we got deeper into the college football playoff, he proved, I think, with his athletic play as well, that he is a guy that is a second round pick to me, mid to late second, that you can plug in as your starter probably by year two. I think that you showed that under Travion Henderson, he can play and be happy in like a timeshare backfield. But I think that he is a guy that you can put in maybe in year two, go in year three, and get the most out of him. Maybe similarly in a way, and they're different types of players, but similarly to what the Buffalo Bills did with James Cook, where they took him in the second round and then it took him about a year, but once he got that starting position, I mean, he's kind of seized it and never let go. I think a really interesting spot for him, Jimmy, that we could see Judkins go to, and this is a little out of left field, so just try to follow with me. What if the Philadelphia Eagles took Quinshawn Judkins at 32 with the last pick of the first round? And you think that that might be foolish
Hmm.
because Saquon Barkley just signed a huge extension. He was the offensive player of the year. He had over 2,000 yards on the ground. I think he had the most rushing yards all time for between regular season and playoffs. But listen to what I just said again, and then maybe it'll make sense. He had 2,000 yards last year. He had the most rushing yards all time for one regular and postseason combined. He played for what, 7 straight months. And sorry, Jimmy, golly, I'm not going to make this mistake again. I have some things on the recording side I'm going to fix in terms of I've got some things to fix. This ring light's killing my eyes, and I showered too early to the or too closely to the podcast. So, anyways, going back into it in 5, 4. But when you have that type of mileage on a running back. I mean, we've seen so many examples of this. It's when I say it's not even funny, I mean, literally, it's not funny. We saw that happen to Larry Johnson with the Chiefs with the 416 carries. He was never the same. We saw that with Todd Gurley as a recent example of a running back that got one too many carries in that 2 to 3 year stretch, and he literally was out of the league in 3 years. Le'Veon Bell is a player that just dropped immediately once you hit that threshold. Saquon Barkley's in his prime, but he's not young. I believe he's going to be 28 this year. He's a guy that just took
Yeah.
a ton of mileage. And you look at even Christian McCaffrey and what's happened to his career, something that you know well, is that had one of the best running back seasons of the last 25 years in 2023. And then, I mean, he was trying not to rupture his Achilles for the first 10 games of the season. Like it's
Yeah.
just you get these running backs that have these seasons, and the Eagles can go one of two ways. They can ride them till the wheels fall off and then the car's totaled, or you can get him a guy in Judkins that can take the pressure off of him, get fresh legs. You don't lose, as obviously when you go to Saquon to a rookie, there's going to be a drop off, but it's not like going from Saquon to your average NFL. Like they signed AJ Dillon, and I loved AJ Dillon in Green Bay, but that guy's shot. Like he's done for.
Yeah. No.
No, he's done. So, and
Yeah.
I love you, AJ Dillon. Please don't watch this. And I loved you in
Love you,
Green Bay. Okay,
Quadzilla. You
love you,
you you
Quadzilla.
are still the quad. Yeah.
Well, yeah, he's even more Quadzilla than Saquon. That's why they brought him. They just wanted Saquon to
That's what.
prove his
That's all it
quads were
was.
bigger, and then they would
They
cut
needed
him.
someone to be able to spot Saquon and Jalen while they're squatting. So they brought in
Exactly.
the only guy
That
in the
is
league that can
that
squat
is
that much.
that is a perfect thing. They gave him a year, and then they're going to make him the strength coach. But
Yeah, it makes sense.
that's my reasoning on why I think it would actually behoove Philadelphia to do that. And here's the thing that you could come back to me that I'd understand with. Why not just take one of these second or third round running backs? Like, why do you have to take it at 32? And that's fair. I can dig it. But it was just a thought experiment of where Judkins could go that would make sense for him, and just a little bit of an insurance policy for a team that won the Super Bowl on the legs of that very same Saquon Barkley. So I have Judkins at mid to late second round. I was a little underwhelmed by the tape until the end, and he had great combine testing numbers. I think with his power, his mentality, and his pedigree, that I feel comfortable in that range if I wanted a starting running back a year from now. Where do you have him, Jimmy, in your rankings? What do you think about the scouting report, and where would you feel comfortable with taking Judkins in this draft?
I've got Judkins at the number four, and he's kind of like the last one that I feel like is in this group. And then there's another tier of them. There's like five guys that I feel like would all kind of be similar to. But I feel like I would have Judkins late first. Like once you're like 22 and on, I feel like that would be a good spot for him
Hmm.
if I was a team. I feel like I would be reaching if I was in the early 20s, but like you said, the closer you get to the end of the first round, maybe there's a team that would want to trade back in to get him at the end of the second or into the first round. But I feel like that situation to Philly would be perfect. And why it would work is because I don't think Saquon would take this as a shot to him. I
No.
don't think he has that type of ego. And listening to him mic'd up on the sideline, he didn't care about his rushing record. He didn't care about getting a single game record against the Giants that season. He would see Judkins coming in as a piece to the team. And if the Eagles are smart, which you know that they are, they don't want to say it out loud so the fans hear it, but they have to protect themselves. Saquon's 28. There's a lot of mileage. This is the only season, knock on wood. No one wants him to get hurt, but he's been injury prone through his career. So why would you not protect yourself by doing that? He's not going to come in and Saquon's not going to be benched, but he's a piece to your team that you needed. How many teams have those multiple pieces at running back that are both great? Yeah, I mean, Derrick Henry is really the only one left in the league, and it was McCaffrey. But as we saw, what happened to him? You get the injury. Derrick Henry is the only one after the age of 28 where he's continued to rise. Just historically, Saquon is at that wall, and he's approaching it. Is he going to knock it down, or is he going to knock him down? Every other running back besides Derrick Henry has gotten knocked down by that wall right around 30.
Yeah, this is someone that I think that Saquon and Derrick Henry are special enough in terms of their athleticism and their profile to make it into their 30s and be productive. I think Derrick Henry's already in his 30s, but it's still, there's always a ticking time bomb with running backs. And the guy said, Adrian Peterson, people act like he completely shriveled up after Minnesota. No, he was like a multiple time 1,000 yard rusher after Minnesota.
Yeah.
He was a good running back. He just wasn't entrusted to be the full time running back anymore because of age and injuries catching up to him. That's just what happens at the position. And again, this is much like I see in the NBA, Jimmy, of players are using load management. And that's like a
Mm-hmm.
really, I mean, that's like almost saying woke in 2025, right? Like it's a really taboo word. But load management, I eventually figured out was because they said, well, it doesn't really prevent injuries, really missing these games. But what it did is it allowed players to play longer. And that is what load management I figured out could be because these players weren't worried about, oh, if I heal, that I'll be better for the playoffs. They'll say, oh, I can get one more max contract if I can play until I'm 35 instead of being shot by 32. And that's kind of what you see with Saquon in this position, or just any team with the philosophy of we've got a running back like this. We want to keep it going with this guy. How do we do it? It's by load managing that running back and making them more in spurts of specialness than it is riding them for a 17 plus game season. In the terms
Yeah.
of any other running backs, I mean, obviously, Jimmy's going to get to Cam Scattaboo. There's Caleb Johnson. There's Ollie Gordon, like we'd mentioned, RJ Harvey out of UCF. The list goes on and on. Like, this is a truly deep and special running back class. DJ Giddens, Devin Neal, like guys like that, like all across the board. The one guy that I want to mention, though, actually was not a starting running back in college last year. His name is Jadon Blue, the running back from Texas. He's a guy that was
Another
very
one from Texas.
mm-hmm.
Another one.
Bijan Robinson, Jonathan Brooks, and now Jadon Blue. Jadon Blue is a guy that is more of a specialist at this point in his career, but he is a very fast running back. He is not a 5 out of 5. There's the kid out of Virginia Tech that might be. I haven't gotten to get my eyes on him yet. But Jadon Blue's very firmly a 4 out of 5 speed running back. And I thought he was really impressive in the college football playoff. And every time I turn on the film for Texas, I keep thinking to myself, like, well, I get this Wisner kid's kind of more of your run of like you're just he's just like a good solid give the ball to the back type of guy, but he wasn't special. And I thought that Jadon Blue was a guy you watch and you're like, man, this speed is real. He can really catch the ball and he can really run routes. I mean, we saw him break the ankles of I want to say it was, gosh, was it Ohio State? It was in the college football playoffs where he went one on one with this backer. No, I think it was Georgia, and he just completely whoop. lost him back in the end zone touchdown, like that type of action. I really like Jadon Blue. I don't know exactly where to rank him because I haven't watched enough of the rest of the tape, but Blue is a guy that I think you can get in the third, fourth round, just depending on where he falls. And I think that he could be, again, I don't know if he could be a starting running back, but I think in a team that passes a lot and just wants a running back to be Jameer Gibbs and I know that's lofty, but you know what I mean, like your speed to a
Yeah.
Thunderback. I'd love to get Jadon Blue on a discount because I think he's better talented wise than where he's going to get drafted.
I feel like that, how you surmise it at the end, is like six different running backs in this draft this year, where I feel like 5 years from now, they're all going to be contributing parts to a team. But like you, there's so many teams have the committee now where they don't have to come in and be a workhorse. They don't have to be the bell cow running back getting 300 carries a year to be effective. But like you said, Jadon Blue can go somewhere, be a piece, and probably get you 5, 6 touchdowns in a season. You know, get you 100 carries if you need. So I feel like he is in that level, and he's another name where you forget, and then you put the tape on, you watch him, and you're like, yeah, look at this guy. I mean, he's got the same skills, he's got the size. It's just, I feel like it's a very middle heavy running back class this year.
Yeah. Is there anybody in that middle range? Like I think it's Caleb Johnson might be his name, the running back out of Iowa. There's
Yeah,
there's Scattaboo, there's Harvey, there's Giddens, there's just all of these running back. Blue, the
Nicholas
kid out of
Singleton from Penn State.
wait Singleton.
Yeah, Singleton out of Penn State. Then you have Woody Marks from USC. I feel like he's one that I've heard.
Ooh, I've
The
heard.
he
I like Woody Marks. You know what? I forgot about Woody Marks. I was watching him in the beginning of some of this tape. I think it was against Penn State or something. I really liked what I saw from him. Yeah, Singleton. I thought he went back to Penn State, but that's that. If he's in this class, then whoa, like I that would be insane. But so, is there anybody out of that group? Maybe Scattaboo, maybe a guy that you want to hit on that you think is being the most under talked about. And when we talk about Judkins, we talk about Henderson, we talk about Hampton, you know, obviously a little below Genty, that you're like, hey, like this guy is that good on their level. He's not getting talked about. I mean, Ollie Gordon, like you said, the fall off was insane. He was considered the best. And then it was just like almost like Chuba Hubbard, like what happened to him. So
yeah.
do you have any guy in this class or?
I feel like Scattaboo is the one that I've fallen in love with, that I just want. I cannot wait to see what he does in the NFL, because nothing about him on paper or measurables is impressive besides his helmet size. Like that's really the only thing that you look at and you're like, damn, that's off the scales. But he is just a gritty gamer. He gets it done. He loves contact. He wants contact. He will do anything and everything you ask him. He can, which his size and his build, you wouldn't think so, but he is a pretty good receiving running back too. He's not built like it. It doesn't make sense how he can track the ball down the field being as stocky as he is. The only thing with him, though, and why I don't think he would go as high as he could based on how he finished the season on that run that he went on with Arizona State, is how many carries he had and the workload he had and just how much punishment he has endured in college. And maybe he's one of those guys that he loves it and he will just keep getting stronger as he gets older. But he's like a throwback Mike Allstott. And I just want to see him go in the league. If I was a team and it's the beginning of the third round or late in the second round, and for whatever reason there's a huge run on running backs, and I need a guy that I just want to come in and be a glue piece for my team, I think Scattaboo is. I would be pounding the table if it's the end of the second round into the third round, and we got our main two pieces. Maybe we want to trade up to get him late in the second round. He's not graded that high, I don't think. But if I was a team, I just want that guy in my building.
No, actually, Jimmy, I agree with you. I thought that when I turned on the college football playoff and saw Scattaboo, I thought that he showed real NFL running back level. So I'm not a starter, but if he was your backup running back and wanted to
Yeah,
do a running back by committee, or you wanted to spot a guy with a little bit of a different skill set, I think that I mean, like Kansas City, Carson Steele 2.0 type of thing.
yeah.
Like, I think he would be perfect in that position. I think he actually tested a little better than everybody thought he would. I think that Cam Scattaboo's an NFL running back, probably more of a backup, but a guy that's going to, I think he's going to have a moment in the NFL somewhere at some point. Like
Oh
he's
yeah.
kind of a winning type of player. Well, Jimmy, let's go ahead. let's move on to the wide receivers because I think that we did a good comprehensive breakdown of the running back class for the time that we are allotted. Wide receiver class, I feel like people are throwing darts all over the board with this receiver class because it seems like everybody has their preference for a guy, and it seems like that nobody's sure of the unanimous player they can agree on. The one player everybody agrees on is a generational talent, may not even play the position, and Travis Hunter at the NFL level. Before we get into his receiver, well, actually, let's save it for the end. Let's start with the receiver and then get to the big question we all ask. Travis Hunter, do you, and I'll just ask you before I break it down, do you think he's the number one receiver in this class if he's strictly a receiver?
Yeah, I think so. I would put him over T Mac for Arizona. I would put him over Golden for Texas. I just think he's shown, even though he has got that slight build, that I don't think it matters. He goes up and he attacks the ball like he's bigger. He plays bigger than he is, and I think that show. I mean, he's a defensive player. He's aggressive. He has the great ball skills. I would put him at number one if he's considered a receiver, which I think he should be in the NFL.
I have him as my number one receiver, obviously, and mine's just more because of the absolute generational. I don't want to throw it around too much, but for a skill position player that's been both sides of the ball, you're going to very rarely find an athlete with his athleticism and his talents and traits. I think he is an absolutely phenomenal football player. I think he actually deserved the Heisman. I know a lot of people say that Ashton Genty got robbed, and I think that some people could have a case, but I think that when you play cornerback and wide receiver and you played as many snaps as he did and you were as highly productive as he was, I really think that it's hard to go against the guy. Who did you have for Heisman, by the way?
I had Travis Hunter.
Interesting. For some reason, I
I
thought you would have gone Genty, but I agree. No, no, that's right. On the radio show, you, Matthew, and I all
Yeah,
said Hunter.
and I actually put in a bet on Travis Hunter. It was before the Kentucky Ole Miss game, whatever part of the year that was. Put a bet in for him to win the Heisman. He was like fifth or sixth odds at that point, and
Bingo,
it came
baby.
home. I was very nervous that it was going to go to Genty, but I just feel like you for what he did, he wasn't average playing two positions. He was the best receiver. You could There was the kid from San Jose State that had better numbers, but just
Oh,
watching
yeah,
him,
yeah, yeah.
he was in the conversation of the best receiver and as lockdown corner gets in college. Like it's not like he was a liability at one. It's like, well, he's a good athlete, so we'll put him out there. Like he was a standout at both. How do you not give that to Heisman? He wasn't just taking up space on the field to get snaps every game. Like he was impactful on both sides.
Yeah, I think he could really, it would really benefit him to get some refinement at the wide receiver position. I don't think that he is as like it's really interesting to compare him and Malik Neighbors, like who I would have rather had at the wide receiver position. I
Mm.
typically just go for who I think is just more naturally talented when it gets to that high in the draft. But then when you go to him and Marvin Harrison Jr., it's a little harder because I think that Travis Hunter is a better athlete than Marvin Harrison Jr., but I thought Marvin Harrison Jr. was a Larry Fitzgerald clone. Like I really did.
Yeah.
I think people overhyped him as in certain ways of being like this game breaker. When I was like, no, this guy's going to be 1,000 yard plus receiver every year for 15 years. Like he is just going to be
Yeah.
tried and true and professional in that sense. And I don't think that Travis Hunter is as good of a receiver playing the position as MHJ was, though that Hunter has the better athleticism. However, when you look at a guy like Justin Jefferson at the NFL level, I think Hunter has a lot of similarities in the way that his body moves, the way he breaks. When you say silky smooth, that is
Yeah.
you hit it on the head, Jimmy. It's his body and his athleticism. It's like he can flip his hips so quickly and not lose any speed changing directions. And the way that he's able to track and catch a football, I think is very impressive. I think that he is a great athlete in space, and I think that that may easily makes him a number one receiver in this draft. I think he is easily like a top 5 to 7 pick if he's a receiver, like only. It's really the duality of the positions. I will say this though, I disagree with you on one thing. I think the guy it could be a like Hall of Fame cornerback. Like I don't know if I can say the same thing at wide receiver, but all the things that I just said about him at wide receiver, though how we'll get to cornerbacks when we do that, so I want to save some of it. But I do think his position is better fit for cornerback. However, I would not be a 100% position guy. I would make him a primary cornerback and install drive packages with him. I wouldn't sub him out every series. Like I would go full series without having Travis Hunter on the field. Let's say midway through the second quarter, midway through the third quarter. But when the game's on the line in the last two, let's say it's like the last 2 minutes of the first half, like you start the game with him, you end the first half, you start the second half, you end the game, and then maybe you have another drive where you put him in there. I think that you maximize his elite athleticism and speed to break a defense, and then you also keep him fresh enough to play cornerback at the NFL level where I think he's best. But I think Travis Hunter is a phenomenal athlete. No matter where you put him, I think he is worth taking very, very high in this draft.
Yeah, and
How
I
high would you
it's
take him if he's receiver only?
if he's receiver, see to me, if I was the Patriots or whoever slotted to take him early, I would still take him early, even if he was just a receiver. I think he's that if for this class, I think he's that good of a receiver. Like I wouldn't take T Mac or Yaboka or Matthew Golden. I would not take them at three, but I would take Travis Hunter at three, even if
Who
he is just going to be a receiver.
Where's he on your big board? Where is he overall? Not positionless. Overall, who's your best? Where does he rank?
I would probably put him second behind Abdul Carter. I would put Abdul Carter, Travis Hunter.
That is the
So
hard.
I would take him top four, top three.
Yeah, that's the hardest thing for me is to figuring out like, do I have Hunter? Because listen, I don't think that Cam Ward is as good of a football player pound for pound as Carter and Hunter are. If you give me the Washington State tape, I feel like really good that I could sit here and say this. But if you give me like what Cam Ward could be in his positional value, I have not kind of no choice but to put him at number one. Like if I was an expansion team or if I were the Titans, like you
Yeah,
can't just pass up on this guy hoping that you'll get it next year because next year could be like this year where you have one guy, then you're picking six and you can't trade up. And the next guy is Shadur Sanders, Jackson Dart, Will Howard. And it's not the
yeah,
same. So that's why I would take Cam or that's why I would put Cam Ward one. It's really a toss up for me between Hunter and Carter. And the closer and closer we get to it, just like the Cleveland Browns, it makes me more want to take him at two because I just think he's that special of an athlete at the skill position. Guys that get the ball in their hands the most. It's not to take away because I think Carter's an elite player in terms of he's an elite pass rusher, and I think you could not say elite player. Like I wouldn't put him as like a tier one god level, outside linebacker pass rusher, but I think that he's certainly elite for this draft and would be the best pass rusher. Oh, we'll talk about that when we get to edges. But it's just like I could have Hunter really 2-3 flip flop him, and he would be 1-2
yeah.
if you took out position. So I think Hunter's great, and that's where I'd have him. So let's get to wide receiver number two in this class. Are you ready for another curveball, Jimmy? Because it seems
Who
like that's
you
all I'm throwing you.
who you got?
I've got Luther Burden the third.
Really?
I think Luther Burden the third, when you turn on the tape, his athleticism is so evident and his ability to run with the football in his hands. I remember this one play against Boston College where he caught this pass about 11 yards from the end zone and he made two defenders look absolutely helpless. They looked like they were in baby strollers next to him, a god of an athlete on that play. And he was so gifted in terms of the way that he's able to break away from players. It's very hard to bring Luther down on the first tackle, especially if you don't have the angle. He's an extremely athletically talented football player. And I think that a lot of the worries with Burden are from some off the field things. His 2024 wasn't good as 2023. He had a couple personal fouls, unsportsmanlike conducts against him. But the funniest thing is that even if you think that he's undisciplined off the field, like even on the field, but like in between the whistles, he's a very clean football player. Even when it came to returning punts, he fair caught a good amount of punts at Missouri. He even fumbled one time. I think that it was just one of those where you fumbled the football, but he fair caught a lot of balls. And a guy that thinks he's the best player and the season's not going the way you want it to, oh, I'm like going to make this up and be the superstar. No, he made the right play every single time on punt returns, which to me tells me he's a disciplined guy. For when you're that talented and people think you're a head case. I don't know the off the field stuff with Luther Burden the third. On the field, though, he reminds me of CeeDee Lamb. Like he does. And CeeDee Lamb as a prospect, people are like, oh, you can't compare Luther Burden to CeeDee Lamb. Luther Burden was a top five prospect in the country
Oh
coming
yeah.
out. Not at his position, but in the country. CeeDee Lamb was also an elite prospect. CeeDee Lamb also went 17th overall and was the third receiver picked in his draft. So let's not have this retroactive like history that CeeDee Lamb has always been
Hmm.
I mean, I thought highly of CeeDee Lamb personally. I did. But when he went 17th in the draft, I was like, guys, am I missing something? It turns out that I wasn't. But in the terms of where CeeDee Lamb can play outside, he can play slot. He's really good with run after the catch, but he can also get open and catch it deep. I think Luther Burden reminds me a lot of what CeeDee Lamb can do, and the athleticism matches up. I would take Luther Burden the third depending on need. I think athletically he's a top 10 player in this class, like talent wise. I think he's top 10 talent in this class. Off the field stuff, whatever it may be, inconsistent hands at times. You could say whatever. I would start the board with Burden around 9 and go down from there. And I'm talking about more in a vacuum, like I guess where he is on my big board. Um,
Yeah.
I don't think he's for every team, though. I think that if you're a team like Jacksonville, I would rather have my third ranked receiver than Burden because it's close enough. But I think that Luther Burden is that good. I think he's a late top 10, definitely in the 11 to 20 range, no doubt about it for me. What about you, Jimmy?
Now, what do you think? 2023 had a great year. Obviously, as you said, he regressed last year, and some of the things start to correlate together when you talk about, after the whistle, some things he would, undisciplined in that way off the field. He had 10 drops last year. 10% of his
Yeah.
targets he dropped last year. That's a lot. But you could also say, like, to
Oh,
have a
Brady
player be
Cook was
so great.
horrible. Like their quarterback, and I
Yeah.
liked him a ton in 2023. I thought their quarterback could have been a first round, second round type of guy last year. He fell off a cliff this season.
Yeah, and I think it's too like the expectations were very high for Luther Burden coming in
Yep.
this year, and it was a disappointing year with those expectations. But I have him fifth on my list. Well, but that fifth, I would say, and when I say where I think he would go, that doesn't mean I think he will go there this year. But for like a grade, I would say later half of the first round is where I would have Burden to go.
Because
Where I
the
still think the
inconsistent
talent is
hands
there.
and the
Yeah,
head case
that's
stuff.
yeah. Mostly just the inconsistent hands is interesting to me. To where you have usually those are the types of things that you don't see. If you're consistent and you have good hands, you're going to be consistent through that. If you have drops, you'll have some sporadically. But like T Mac for Arizona, I believe he had 4 drops all of last year with like 120 targets. But with Burden and two, you go okay. So his size, like you said, he has to go to the right fit. He has to go to a team that already has the bigger receiver that they have, or they already have their other guy. So he has to be able to fit. But I would put a grade on him for late in the first round for Burden. I still think he's a solid receiver, and I think I'm more apt to trust the 2023 film than I would say the 2024 is who he is, if that makes sense.
No, it does. It does. I'm in love with the guy from a talent perspective. I think you see things like this happen all the time. Again, CD Lamb, like Henry Ruggs went above him. Judy, I agreed with. Ruggs, I didn't. Like I thought Judy was just such a special route runner. But CD Lamb I had as a top 10 player in his class, and he should have gone in the top 10, and he proved it all of the last 3+ years. I mean, of how good he is. But number three player, I actually have a team in the top five, even though he's the third receiver on my board, that if I was the GM of this team, that I would take this guy at fifth overall, even though he's the third receiver on my board. I know it sounds crazy, but I think Tet McMillan of Arizona is a player whose stock has fallen. I think there's an appropriate range for it. I think it's fallen way too far. And I don't know where the anti Tet McMillan stuff has come from. Look, I actually agree. I don't think he's a number one receiver. I don't think he's a number one. But what I mean by that is I don't think he is a number one receiver in terms of pure like raw talent. But what I love
Mm-hmm.
about Tet McMillan is that he is a true number one type of possession receiver. Like he is athletic, he is huge, he catches the ball very well, and he is good in short like spaces in terms of like there was a tons of slants that he turned into first downs. I wouldn't compare him to DeAndre Hopkins. I think Keenan Allen is probably a favorable comparison to him. He reminds me a little bit of Mike Evans. They're a little different stylistically, but when you just think of those big receivers that go up, Drake London is a really popular one. And I think that you're getting in
Hmm.
the ballpark with Drake London. I actually think McMillan, even though Drake London got that basketball athletic background, I actually think that McMillan's a little more athletic and football athletic. I just do. I think he's more wiggly. I didn't see a receiver that I thought will be an all pro or one of the best receivers in the league someday guy on tape. Like, I really like some of his catches, but I think that he may be a little limited deep. Like, everybody thinks he's a jump ball artist, but I don't necessarily think that's his game. I actually think he's a lot better from the 10 yards and in as a possession guy. And with all that being said, I think that if you're the Jacksonville Jaguars and you're sitting at number 5, you have your number 1 guy in Brian Thomas Jr. Like, he is an explosive game breaker. Like, that's a guy that I think could maybe potentially one day be the best receiver in football. Like, I don't take it lightly when I say this. It was 2 games into the year, and I texted a buddy of mine. I have the receipt on my phone. Like, Brian Thomas Jr. is doing some Randy Moss stuff out here. Like, in terms of
Yeah.
height, speed, deep ball play, the guy's special. So for me, if you want your most valuable asset on your team is not this 5th overall pick, it's Trevor Lawrence. And you've had a really tough time getting the best out of him. Liam Cohen just came over from Tampa Bay and saw how important Mike Evans was to just keeping the offense going and giving your young quarterback a big target to hit when he needs it most. I think McMillan slotting in as Trevor Lawrence's security blanket and then letting Brian Thomas Jr. be the special receiver, I think you elevate Trevor Lawrence many levels. And for me, that is the most important thing you can do for your franchise. I think that McMillan is probably more suited. I think similarly in the Luther Burden range, I like Burden more. But if you took him anywhere from 9 to especially in the teens, like, I would be perfectly happy with McMillan. I don't think he's an absolute stud, but I think if you get him in the right space like that, he can really take a young quarterback from struggling to being in a really good position.
And I feel like if he goes to a place like Jacksonville too, they've tried getting that complimentary receiver. They found their number 1 with Brian Thomas Jr., but they tried the Christian Kirk experiment, paid him a lot of money. That didn't work. They tried bringing in Gabe Davis. Gabe Davis isn't going to be a solid, reliable number 2. He can get you big plays down the field every now and then, but he's not a reliable number 2 consistent target. Evan Ingram is gone. That was Trevor Lawrence's security blanket. So I think I agree. Now, it would be a little bit of a reach to take him that high, but if they did, I wouldn't hate that pick at all. I
Right, but
love
this draft
Steven. I mean,
class,
I
you
just
know,
his size. Exactly. That's the thing is it's like when you're a team, it all it takes is one GM to fall in love with you. Who cares if you call it a reach, if you don't call it a reach? It's if he fits, he fits. Like look at how great Brian Thomas Jr. was last year. If they took him, if they had the number 2 pick and they took him second overall, would anyone bat an eye after
no,
last
not
year?
not
No.
anymore. Mm-mm.
It's just, he has to go to the right place, but with his size, his ability to go up and get the ball, consistent hands. I like the Mike Evans comparison. That's who I feel like he fits the most. Like balls in the air, Mike Evans, his 40 speed, he was never that fast. He timed, I think, slower even than Tet did. But when the ball's in the air, Mike Evans has another gear. These bigger receivers, they will have like they will go ball, see ball, get ball. Is like I feel like that's his mindset with everything. And I absolutely love him as a prospect. There's another big receiver in this draft too that's built very similar type games that I have.
We're
That's not in my top 5, but he's gonna be in there. Like he
Oh,
is
he's my number 5.
a
I know
T
who you're
Mac
talking
light,
about.
if you will.
He's my number 5.
Okay,
We'll
yeah,
get to him, but I
yeah,
know
we'll get
exactly
to
who you're
him.
talking about. But so yeah, just to wrap it up, we're both fans of McMillan. I just think that like with Hunter, I like his top end athleticism just the most, and I think he's separate from Burden and McMillan. I do think that Burden athletically is close to Travis Hunter's level in terms of being a receiver. I just think Hunter's a little better of an athlete, a little more maybe a little more of a project Hunter is, but just someone I think is just more naturally talented. And that's why I have like McMillan and Burden kind of right there. I just prefer Burden's natural God given athleticism more than McMillan's, though I think that McMillan, like if I'm Jacksonville, I'm taking McMillan over Burden because that's what Trevor Lawrence needs. I'm more worried about
Yeah.
getting Trevor Lawrence what he needs. Like this is about building. I think that Ben Johnson said it. It's not about getting the best receivers sometimes. It's about getting a basketball team. Like it's about getting a big receiver, a small, fast receiver, a possession receiver, a run after the catch receiver, like all these different guys. And I think that that's what Lawrence needs. Like I think Burden just doesn't do what Lawrence needs, which is just someone to rely on. And then, by the way, just to talk about Brian Thomas Jr. for a second, I honestly, if you told me that I could have the draft today and I had Marvin Harrison, Malik Neighbors at the top in my top five. But if you told me I could make the first wide receiver off the board pick, I'd pick BTJ. Like that's how much he impressed me. And I don't think I'm overkilling it. I think that Brian Thomas Jr. is that good.
Just to put respect on the receiver class last year, four receivers, three receivers, and Brock Bowers went for 1,000 yards. The years before that, 2023 had one with Puka, two in 2022, Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, two in 2021, one in 2020 and 2019. We had four last year with pass catchers that went over 1,000 yards. That's why when you go back to it and look at it, it's like I, it was impossible to grade those guys. And when you go back and look, it's like they all performed. I mean, Marvin Harrison Jr. was disappointing,
Yeah,
but
he
he
was
still
still
had for a
good.
rookie.
Yeah.
Yeah, for a rookie, but it's the expectations, it's the name, it's all the hype around him since he was a freshman. But he was still a solid rookie wide receiver. So it's looking at that class compared to what we have this year. It's like it. Who knows with all these guys? I think there's going to be a lot of them that go in the second round. There's going to be a huge run. Like receivers, running backs. There's a lot of guys that are just going to be great value picks that you could get in the second round if you miss out on any of them in the first.
Yeah, don't forget about your boy McConkey too. I know that. I know you love to see what he did with Justin
Love
Herbert
that.
out there.
Speaking of T Mac, would that not be a great spot for him to go with Justin Herbert
Oh,
behind McConkey?
it'd be great. It'd
I
be great.
mean,
I'd still
yeah,
want someone that's dynamic there, but I think that if Jim Harbaugh, like he could get enough out of the run game plus pass game, because I think that Justin Herbert's so talented that he can make the most out of it. I mean, I think Justin Herbert's arguably the most talented quarterback in the league. And I know people love to say that he's if man, like if this, if that with Justin Herbert. No, I think Justin Herbert's just a stone cold player. Like
yeah.
it honestly, there was a time I would take it back now, but there was a time I would have taken Justin Herbert over Mahomes, like to start a franchise just based on pure talent.
Yeah.
But Mahomes is so special, like the mistake. I mean, I think he's been to 5 Super Bowls at this point.
He's
Like,
just he's just got it. Whatever it is, it
yeah.
just
Unfortunately, obviously, they're always going to hate the guy at the top. But like, I don't hate Patrick
yeah.
Mahomes, but I'm like, you can be everybody else's favorite. I'll pick Justin Herbert, right?
Yeah.
But this is we'll get to Matthew Golden here at number 4. I don't know what to do with Matthew Golden. And I think that I just kind of have it down with him. He's a guy that I think is going to be a really good number 2 wide receiver in this league. He's very crisp in his routes. He has blazing speed, which we saw at the combine. He's able to separate at the intermediate level. I think he's able to separate pretty well at all 3 levels. I don't know how much, I know that he had better yards after the catch numbers than you would think, but I don't think at the NFL level he's going to be like Tyreek Hill, where he's making these like, oh my goodness, like Tyreek Hill just broke this and broke into the touchdown. Like, I don't see that. I think he's just like a really crisp receiver, a number 2 guy. And I think that running a 4.29 honestly gives him a bump for me. When you have that elite speed, even if I don't love you, like I don't love Matthew Golden. Like I think Mecca Buka is arguably a better just overall wide receiver. I take Golden because like I'm getting 4.29 on a football field for a guy that knows how to play wide receiver. Like, no, I'm comfortable with that. I don't love Golden in the top half of the first round. I know that I think that in my hot take, and it's not really hot, I think it shows that receivers with elite speed go higher than you think. I think Matthew Golden's going to go higher than people think. Like, I think he could be the guy that goes in the top 10. I think he could be the guy that maybe the Raiders take and people say, whoa, like, how did that happen? but I don't think it's all just based off of the speed. I think in the college football playoff, we saw that it's also skill and ability. So
Yeah.
I feel very comfortable with Matthew Golden. For me, is more of a player that's in that early 20s range, like in the year where we had Njigba, we had Jordan Addison, we had Quentin Johnston, like that group of guys that went, I think, back to
Yeah.
back to back to back. That's the group of receivers. I think he's more in the level of it. And I think Matthew Golden, I would only feel comfortable really with him starting in that range. But like I said, when you can play wide receiver as well as he can and you run a 4.29, it's going to turn a lot of people's heads. I think he's going to go a lot higher in real life than we think he will.
Yeah, I've seen him and McMillan now flip flop, where a lot of people have Matthew Golden as the number one receiver, and everyone says number one because they're not including Travis Hunter. So it's like Travis
Right,
Hunter's
right,
the
right. That's why I led
understood
with
number one
Hunter. Yeah.
receiver, yeah, but it's like it's been between McMillan and Golden, and I've seen, and I do think it just comes down to Golden ran faster. People like it when receivers run fast. McMillan didn't run fast, so I feel like that's what it comes. Why he is now getting the talk, but I do think he will go higher. Like I could see Golden going in the top 15. I could see that. Maybe he replaces McMillan as that first receiver, but I have him and Uboka swapped to where
Interesting.
I have Golden just one behind.
I actually okay, but I don't have Igbuka 5. I have him 6, but I think you could flip
Mm,
flop him with my number 5 guy just because I think they're athletic limitations. Let's go to Ibuka since he's your guy at 5, and then I'll get to my guy who I think we both. Ibuka to me, I think he is a late first round, early to mid second round. Like I think he's a top 50 player. I think he's just a professional wide receiver. In fact, he's
yeah.
been this good since he was a freshman. I don't think he's a game breaker by any means. Like I don't think he is going to be the top receiver in football someday. But if you really twisted my arm and said, give me a guy, I would go like, okay, maybe Amon-Ra St. Brown. Like maybe that he could be that level of guy. But I feel more comfortable with him just being like a solid slot receiver, possession receiver, like a faster Jarvis Landry. And Jarvis Landry had a ton of success at the NFL level. But I like Igbuka. I think last year he could have played in the pros. Like he is a professional wide receiver that happened to play college football last year. I think if you're a Super Bowl contending team and you need a receiver or you need some juice on offense, he's going to be the typical guy that comes in and is playing in AFC championship games, NFC championship games, Super Bowls, and just being a guy that's not the best player on the offense, but a guy that we're always like, man, that Igbuka really knows how to get the job done.
Yeah, I think exactly what you said there. He is just a professional wide receiver. And the little things to me stand out that he's had to play second fiddle now to Marvin Harrison Jr. and then now to Jeremiah Smith. And you don't hear a word from him. You hear him mic'd up on the sidelines. He doesn't care. He wants to win games, whatever he has to do. He doesn't have to be the number one. He doesn't have to be the alpha, but he is just so consistent at everything. It seems like he's always right there when you need him to. He is going to be one that I think has the longevity in the NFL. Like you said, he's not going to be that number one receiver in the league. I don't see. Maybe he does end up being that, but you're not drafting him for that those expectations. But I think he's going to come in and act like a 5-year vet in the league. He's not going to come in and play like a
Immediately.
rookie. I don't see
Mm-hmm.
that. And to me, he gets a bump above Golden because he's a part of that Ohio State factor. You have to start putting something into that. Like there is something up there. I don't know if it's the coaching they get, the wide receiver, what it is, but there's been so many now where it's like, okay, and he's been there for a good bit of them. I mean, he's been there for the last, 3, 4 years. So he's been through all of these other guys and he's been right at that level. So I feel like almost just because he's at Ohio State, you're like, well, here you go. You're the next first round guy.
Are you not a fan of the Texas wide receiver factory? The Adonai Mitchell and the Xavier Worthy and
Yeah,
the
that. Yeah. AD Mitchell was. There's still potential with AD Mitchell, and Xavier Worthy had a couple splash plays this year. You know,
God.
he was pretty good.
There's a receiver out of Texas that came out in another loaded wide receiver class. It might have been like AJ Green and Julio Jones and Alshon Jeffrey. Like I think Alshon might have been the year after, but it was like in this. He was a receiver at Texas. I thought he was gonna be the like on that level. I've got to find his name at some point. Hopefully, I can bring it back. Maybe next time you talk about the next guy, I can look him up real quick. But it's going to be hard. He's a guy that never made it to the NFL, but I just loved it. I thought he was great. I got to remember who this guy was soon because it's just one of those real gems that only like 100 NFL draft people are going to be like, yes, I know him. I was in on him too. But after that, the guy that I actually have ranked above him at fifth because I just like him more as a potential number one option is Trey Harris of Ole Miss. I think that Trey Harris, time and time again in the NFL, showed why. I mean, if you said, "Hey, can you be one of the top three receivers in the SEC?" That will put you on a number one receiver stamp. Trey Harris, like, passed the resume. It seems like that he's checking all the boxes that his boss wanted him to, but he's not going to get the promotion. And it's crazy how that works because Trey Harris was Jackson Dart's life raft all year long. He's the one that's going to help make Jackson Dart a lot of money because, like Manziel and Mike Evans, I thought that Harris is better than Dart. Like, Harris is the better of those two. Harris is the one that made the other. And he was a guy that transferred up from like Louisiana Tech. I think. Like, he didn't even start in the SEC, but he was a guy that proved it, hopped in the transfer portal, went to Mississippi, and this guy was a beast for the last two. Definitely like last year, just a beast of a wide receiver. I think he displays like really great possession wide receiver skills. He had a couple of drops, but he also had a ton of volume. He's a guy that didn't have a ton of routes, but he was a guy that I think that can catch the short area game, can go deep, can win possessions. I think that he is a starting wide receiver in the NFL, no questions about it, and can become a favorite of an NFL player. Like, I think that he is in the mold of like a Cortland Sutton. And then at the very, 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 very high end that I don't think he'll reach because of athletic limitations, but like Brandon Marshall, like that type of
Mm,
wide receiver in terms of style
yeah.
and what he can bring to an offense. I'm a huge fan of Trey Harris.
Yeah, I like him in maybe it's because he played at Ole Miss, but I feel like he's a similar size to AJ Brown, 6'2", 205. So he's a big guy. He's got the physicality. I just love it when you combine his size with someone who can go up and make plays in the like a T. Higgins will go up and attack the ball. He will go up and be your jump ball receiver if you need him to. He can go over the middle. And I think Trey Harris, it helped that he had Jackson Dart. Kind of like you said, though, who helped who the most. It's kind of one of those the perfect storm where you have the two of them. They both helped each other's draft stock, but I think Trey Harris is going to be that, and he would be another one where he's in that mix that I have for my guys 2 through 5. That would pretty much be able to go anywhere in the latter half of the first round. I would be happy getting a Trey Harris. I feel like he's going to be one that goes more in the middle of the second round. But again, if you're a team that needs a receiver and you missed out on T-Mac or you missed out on whoever the second receiver was, and you get a Trey Harris in the second round, I think you're getting a guy that can come in this year and easily be 1,000-yard receiver. I would not be surprised at all. Trey Harris is one of the 2 or 3 guys this year that get to over 1,000 yards.
Well, I finally found the guy, by the way, is was
I have a
uh
guess.
who?
Is it Limas Swede?
No, 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 no. Lima Swede was in
Ah,
like 2006. Like, I remember Lima
okay.
Swede. No, this guy is like a guy that never made it into like the league. His name was Malcolm Williams. He was a wide receiver for Texas, 6'3", 228 pounds. He had it looks like, let's see, it was his, I want to say like his freshman or junior year, he had this game where I mean, it just went single game list. Yeah, he had 182 yard game. He had 182 yards and 2 touchdowns against number 7 Texas Tech his freshman year. And it was just a guy that I thought was going to be up there with like Julio and AJ
Good.
Green. It's just,
He's the one.
gosh, he was the one. And then, do you have any other receiver before, like my sleeper receiver, just a guy that I think is going to be a pro that no one is talking a ton about because I think he's more of like a fourth, fifth round, 6th round range receiver. I would take him in as early as the 4th round for sure. Jimmy Horn Jr. of Colorado. Like, there were plenty of times where I would squint my eyes and go like, is that Travis Hunter? And it would be Jimmy Horn Jr. And I was like, okay, no, he wasn't as
Yeah.
big. He wasn't as silky, but I was like, he was big enough and fast enough and silky enough for me to say, was that Travis Hunter? I don't think it was, but I think it could have been. I really like Jimmy Horton Jr. I think he's going to be a steal. I think he's going to be like a 10-year pro. Like when you see a guy like Taylor Gabriel or some of these guys that just like make it into the league for years and are just really good receivers. Darnell Mooney, like I think he could be like that type of guy this year.
Yeah, the other one that I really like is the guy that is built very similar to McMillan, Jaden Higgins from Iowa State,
Mm,
6'4", 215,
hmm.
ran sub 4.5 in his 40. So I feel like he's another guy to where if you miss out on T-Mac and you don't want to spend a first round pick on him, you'll be able to get Jaden Higgins second, maybe even third round, depending on, or he could be one of those that's a part of that run because there's always a couple runs on receivers. So a guy that maybe has a third round grade, if there's guys going early in the second round, he's going to be one of that next group I think that's taken up. But again, he's that same guy where you need to find that fit for him because he is that bigger outside receiver. He's like that traditional X receiver that teams need and they look for, like that Keon Coleman type that the Bills got. But I like Jaden Higgins. He's a name that isn't really mentioned up at the top of the receivers. Like there's not really, he's not going to be one of those guys that goes top 10, top 12. But I think he is a solid receiver that has all of those skills. He checks all those boxes you're looking for. Big, physical, can move, runs a 4.47. And I think he's one that checks all those boxes.
Yeah, and shout out to guys like Savion Williams. Shout out to the receiver at Virginia Tech. I'm sorry, I'm blanking at the moment. There, Kyle Williams, like shares a name of San Francisco 49er legend, but he was a guy that looked great with Cam Ward back when Cam Ward was slinging it, and a guy that I'm trying to. I just had it and it escaped me. Oh, a guy that I thought you'd like is Colorado State wide receiver Horton. Like he's a guy that has been really good there for this receiver class is low key like the running back
The
class.
Tory,
Yeah, Torrey Horton.
Tory Holton. Yeah.
This receiver class is much like the running back class. I think it's deep and you can get a lot of guys in this one. So, Jimmy, do you have enough time to do tight ends or you got to clock out?
Yeah, we can go through the tight because there's not that many tight ends to go
No,
through. I feel like
no.
there's a couple names that everybody knows, and then there's one other name from a school pretty close to here in Lexington that I feel like is getting some buzz.
Ooh, I can't wait to hear about that. But I'll start at the top, and we could kind of. I'll let you since you're deciding to stay on. Do you want to talk about Tyler Warren or Colston Loveland first?
I feel like Tyler Warren is more of the interesting tight end because he's not your prototypical uh the guy from Michigan. He's more of that prototypical inline. He's got the size. He plays the normal tight end position where Tyler Warren
Well,
is
let me
not
stop
that.
you
He
there.
kind of does.
I think I actually kind of think that Colston, like when we get to Colston Loveland, I actually kind of differ on that with Warren and Loveland just in the terms of like how they're built out to be. But Warren, if you want to start there, like Tyler Warren is a guy that I had
Mhm.
a tough time really kind of nailing down. Like he's huge. Like he's exactly
Yeah.
what you look for in an NFL tight end. Like the guys that consistently get drafted and go to the NFL year after year are just these big, bulky, fast enough white guys. And that is exactly
Yeah.
what Tyler Warren is. He's a big, bulky, just fast enough white guy. But the thing about him is that he has enough athleticism that his coaching staff trusted him to play wildcat quarterback and even throw the football a couple of times. Like he like what I think what people want Tyler Warren to be is Travis Kelce, like a receiver that is
Yes.
really big but can evade in space and get you the extra yards. Like I see what people want out of Tyler Warren, and the thing that I'll give him the most in terms of receiving is that he really can get away from linebackers at that second level, and it's almost impossible to tackle him one on one once he does catch the football. However, when I watch it, he's just not my cup of tea as a tight end. Like he's close. Like he's got the size and the strength to block. Like he's got the size and the strength to be a physical runner. Like I don't have any doubts about that. But just in terms of what I like from my tight ends, and maybe he'll prove me wrong. I think there was a reason he didn't really run agilities or anything like that. Like he's good. He's fast in a straight line, but I don't think he's very twitchy. I think maybe he's so big that his twitchiness is good enough, and that's what makes him
Hmm.
special to people. I've seen Tyler Warren consistently ranked in the top 10 and not at the bottom, like in the middle of the top 10. And I just don't see it. Like I would not spend a top half of the first round pick on Tyler Warren. I do not think he is as dynamic as Brock Bowers was. Granted that Warren is much
Hmm.
bigger and much just a bulkier guy. That's just the way I think that I might end up being wrong about this. But when I evaluate tight ends, like I think that they're going the way of the running back, in my opinion. I think tight ends are becoming more and more cyclable. And I think that tight ends are positions. They just have a low hit rate, man. And like I'll go forever. There was one tight end, and I'll get to him in my comparison of the next guy that I would take that high. But when you're just not like super dynamic, it's just hard for me. I think Travis Kelsey's a much better athlete than Tyler Warren is. Like I just think he was lighter and a little more smooth. I think Tyler Warren's just more of your typical big, like fast enough. Like I think he'll have a fine NFL career, but I think it would shock me if he had multiple 1,000 yard seasons. Like he's not Greg Olson. Like that's not the type of guy that he
Yeah.
is. If I had to my favorite spot for him, like I said, I would not take him in the top. I wouldn't take him in the top 25. I don't think. I think I would take him maybe at the end of the first round if I was like told to take a tight end that fit that profile. Like, sure, whatever. Like, he's athletic enough. But one place that I really find fun for him is Carolina. I think Carolina could be really fun because just like Trevor Lawrence and what I've talked about him, I think that Bryce Young is your most important asset with the Panthers. You need to do your best to maximize him. And the way to maximize him is to give him a security blanket, give him someone that is big and tough and strong to like take some of that heat off of him. Tyler Warren had a ton of short range plays. And to be honest, Jimmy, you're going to think I'm crazy, but I'm going to Bill Belichick this. Tyler Warren played a ton of snaps in the Wildcat and even under center on quarterback sneaks. That has become such a huge part of the modern game as the tush push for fourth and ones. And it
Yeah.
legitimately does change games. You can't do it with Bryce Young, but Tyler Warren has so many snaps at the quarterback position that you could trust him to be the guy to do the quarterback sneaks, to do that. And to me, I think football wise, strategy wise, that it's genius. And I think that it helps Bryce Young. It helps you in these packages to do the tush push. I think Tyler Warren should be a Carolina Panther, but comfortably me, I wouldn't take him in the top. Like I said, I wouldn't take him in the top 20. That's for sure.
Yeah. Now, what if you're a team? I was just going through guy like teams that have young quarterbacks that have other skill positions but are missing a great tight end. What if he went somewhere like Washington with Jaden Daniels? You
Yes.
have Zach Ertz, but is Zach Ertz really Zach Ertz? He's hanging on by a thread. But
Yes.
think of even if you have a vet like a Zach Ertz to teach whoever that next tight is coming in. But I just feel like in you get him with a Cliff Kingsbury and his creativity I feel like you could do some things with time, but I feel like that's where I would kind of put him is into that end of the 20s, like from about 23 on. If you're a team like that who seems like they have a lot of other pieces, but you're missing that one potential where, like you said, he's a different type of player than Brock Bowers. He's not going to lead the entire league in receiving yards where Brock Bowers could potentially do that one day. Who knows? But I feel like he could be that solid, consistent enough safety blanket, security blanket for a young quarterback like Jaden Daniels that's proven he can get it done.
Well, my number two tight end is this is the most difficult thing. I think my number two tight end will be a commander. I think Colston Loveland, Jaden Daniels, like he may have gotten the most help from Terry McLaurin his rookie year in terms of making him the quarterback that he was, but he had no position he preferred and no player he preferred to throw to more than Zach Ertz. And I know that Washington took Bennett Sanad, I think is his name, from Kansas State
Yeah.
last year, pretty high. Like he's a guy that they obviously believe in, but Jaden Daniels loves the tight end position and felt so comfortable. And I didn't mean to be too contrarian to you earlier. I just think Tyler Warren's such a big tight end, like just big and rough and rumbling, but not a
Yeah.
lot of. He doesn't have a lot of wiggle to him, even though he's very fast in a straight line. Colston Loveland's a wide receiver playing tight end. Like he's a throwback to
Yeah.
those guys that we had years ago. The problem with me is that, and the reason why the tight end position just devalued to me is it used to be, Jimmy, when we were in, our early to mid 20s, is that that's the tight end that you wanted. But I think that the Kyle Pitts fiasco, like I thought Kyle Pitts, like I had Trevor Lawrence in that draft number one. Kyle Pitts is, number one, I would not have put him at tight end. I would have gotten him a little
Yeah.
leaner and put him at wide receiver. I thought that Kyle Pitts, I think in the last non-quarterbacks in terms of since 2016, because Joey Bosa was my like Mendoza line for like non-quarterbacks, Kyle Pitts was the only one. I would have to go back the last couple of years to see if anybody got it. Like maybe Aiden Hutchinson reached that, but Kyle Pitts and Joey Bosa were in a class of their own of non-quarterbacks, like prospect. People love to hate Kyle Pitts. That guy was as special as it gets as a receiver. He
Yeah.
was bigger than every defender he went up against, and he was faster than them too. And it's just he wasn't Calvin Johnson, but he was just such a mismatch. And I think the Atlanta Falcons did him a terrible disservice. And I think even going back to that running back conversation of like, why didn't Trent Richardson work out? To me, like Najee Harris was in my top 10. Like, why didn't he work out? It's just sometimes I think players get injured. And I think Kyle Pitts got injured. And I think that times you still see those flashes. But I'll never back off my Kyle Pitts thing. I'll show you the tape and show you why he was the best non quarterback in his draft class. But Colston Loveland, what worries me is that he's such a good receiver and he's so built like a wide receiver. Is he actually going to get to play wide receiver? Because if you're drafting him as a pure tight end, like I just watched the receiving reps, I didn't watch the blocking. I heard he gives effort, but he's not like a natural like inline tight end blocker.
Hmm.
But like that's fine, but if you're having trouble using Kyle Pitts in the NFL, like hopefully another team could use Loveland in a different way. He's obviously more of a wide receiver than he is a tight end. He is a great pass catcher. I remember even watching JJ McCarthy stuff, and I even said to myself, like, "Oh, when does this Colston Loveland kid come out?" Like, I had to find out because McCarthy was so reliant and he was so good. Well, then he hurt his knee, and I was like, "Dang, he would have been great in this tight end class or in this draft class back in 2024." Well, fast forward a year later, and he's a consensus top two tight end. I think Colston Loveland is extremely talented. I think he is a first round football player. I would have hesitancy taking him in the first round if I didn't have an offensive coordinator that could utilize him properly. But I really like Colston Loveland's game, and I think that he is a 8 to 10 year tight end in the NFL. He reminds me of like Evan Ingram, like no question about it.
Yeah. See, and that's the thing is you can have these days so many teams, just like teams now have multiple running backs that they rely on. There's plenty of teams that have drafted tight ends back to back years. I mean, the Raiders drafted Michael Mayer. He was supposed to be, he was a top consensus
Yeah, and
tight
they're
end.
looking
And
to
they
trade
draft
him now.
Brock Bowers.
Yeah.
Yeah, but look what the Bills did. They had Dawson Knox, and he was a serviceable tight end. Then they go and draft Dalton Kincaid. Kincaid is more of that receiving tight end, where Dawson Knox can kind of do more of the inline and play receiving tight end. So I feel like with his size and just being more on the leaner side and not being a as wanting to run blocker, because there's some tight ends like George Kittle. He's not the biggest guy. He's just a psychopath that loves to run block. Some guys just have that, other guys don't. So I feel like you said, first round talent, but I hope he goes somewhere that can use him, and it'll probably be somewhere into the second round. But it's crapshoot. Is he going to go where he should go and actually be able to use his talents, or is he just going to be wasted like Kyle Pitts has? And I'm with you on Kyle Pitts. I still think there's talent in there somewhere,
Yep.
and there's no way he can just. This is his career, especially after his rookie year. He had 1,000 yards. Like
Unless
he
the
showed that
injury
he
that
could
he
do it.
received. Yeah, unless it was the
Yeah,
injury. That's
there's
the
got to
only
be
thing.
something.
And so, but Colston Loveland, I think he will be a first round pick. Like I said, if I'm the Commanders, and unless there's a guy that I can't pass up drops to me, like I'm taking Colston Loveland. Like he is exactly what Jaden Daniels needs for the next 5 to 10 years of his career is a tight end like that. So I really like Colston Loveland. I think he's a first round football player. I think he's a 10 year pro. I'm all in on Colston Loveland. He proved it for 2 straight years. He's a great receiving tight end. So the rest of this, we just have a couple guys to hit on. I want to mention Elijah Arroyo. I want to mention Mason Taylor. And by the way, shout out Michael Mayer from Covington Catholic in Kentucky. I actually got to see Michael Mayer play in high school, but not football. The only game I ever got to see him play was a basketball game he was in playing in. So that's like, what are the chances that I got to see Michael Mayer play in high school, but it was in basketball and not football. But but then Harold Fannin Jr. is the last one. So Elijah Arroyo, Mason Taylor, Harold Fannin Jr. To me, when I look at a tight end in the modern NFL, unless they are extremely special like Kyle Pitts, I prefer a guy like Elijah Arroyo later in the draft, in the third round, second round range, that I can develop him more into a dynamic weapon because of their pure athleticism. And I would rather take some picks on tight ends and miss on super athletes and train them than draft one in the first round. So what are your thoughts of Elijah Arroyo? Is he a guy that if you get him in the right with the right coaches that he can become an NFL superstar like Jimmy Graham, or do you think the ceiling's a little lower but you still think he'll be solid?
No, I think his ceiling is somewhere in that Jimmy Graham range, and I love him. I don't know when you watch the film because he's not the name that's mentioned. It's really been Loveland and Tyler Warren. Those are the two tight ends that everyone's mentioning. You're not really hearing much about Arroyo. He was Cam Ward's favorite target. And when you watch him on film, you're like, where's the negative here? I don't see what the negative is here with him. He seems like he can do it all. I want my Niners to go after him to be the heir apparent to George Kittle.
Yeah.
He looks like he could be kind of a similar type tight end, and in the Shanahan system, you know that he's going to use tight ends. I would love if he fell to the Niners, one of their second or third round picks. I would prefer third round. I think he could fall to that third round just because there's so many other skill players mucked up in that same little area of the draft where I feel like he could be a steal in the third round. And I believe George Kittle was a third round pick as well. A lot of these tight ends in the
Something
NFL are
about
those mid round picks.
pretty much like Iowa guys, you know. And then, real quick, back to the point about Tyler Warren again. Like when we talk about him, I don't think he's like a Sam Laporta or any type of thing. I don't mean to crap on Tyler Warren, but like when we talk about guys, I just like shiftier tight ends. I think Tyler Warren will be fine in the
Mm-hmm.
NFL. I just think he could be a little disappointed. Do you have any thoughts on or Mason Taylor, real quick? I think he's a third or fourth rounder. I think he could have a career like Cade Otton has with the
Mm-hmm.
Buccaneers, where he was drafted, didn't really produce with Tom Brady when they needed to, but really came in really well with Baker Mayfield, arguably the second best receiver on the team there at the end of the year, if not very clearly the second best receiver on the team at the end of the year. Maybe I should say first best receiver on that team. I think Mason, do you have any arguments? Mason Taylor, third round height, fourth round floor, maybe second round. He's
Yeah, I
Jason
think I think
Taylor's
that's
son, former
yeah.
Miami.
So
Yeah.
he's
Got the
got that
genes.
going for him.
And
So
you
I
like
and
that
again
out
I
of
feel like
guys.
when you yeah, I to me it's like the Ibuka going to Ohio State, the receiver factory. That gets you a couple notches up. If you're right here with the same guy, that gets you notches up. If you're a second generation NFL player, something about it. I trust that you're going to make the right decisions off the field and preparing for everything. You have someone you can go to for these questions. It seems like little things, but I feel like those types of things matter when you're drafting a young guy going into the league.
Any thoughts on Harold Fannin Jr. before we get out of here?
He is going to be a fascinating project for someone to draft. He had 65 catches in 2 years before this last year. He had 117 catches for
Unbelievable.
1,500 yards this year. Right. He's 6'3", 220. He's hurdling guys out there on the field. And you can say, well, he played at Bowling Green. It's a small school. He had two games against big schools, against Texas A&M and Penn State back-to-back weeks, had over 100 yards and a touchdown in both of those games. So he showed that he could do it this year. But again, it's like, okay, wait. No one heard of this guy. He had 65 catches total in 2 years, and then he comes out of nowhere. So I don't. He's 6'3", 220 or 6'4", 230. That's a very small tight end. He would again have to be that hybrid kind of what can he do, where can you use him? But he has the raw athletic ability. It's just he hasn't shown that he could do it at a high level for a long time. So you're taking a risk on a lot of raw talent, and I'm fascinated to see what he can do.
Yeah, the thing that hurts him, he's a little undersized, and he didn't. But it's not the undersized part; it's that he didn't have a good combine pro day. He was kind of tested as an average athlete. He reminds. I want to see if I get the name in the school right. It was Harrison Bryant, the tight end out of FAU, that ended up in Cleveland. That had like 1 or 2 years where he kind of was like
Yeah.
popping, because I think that he was also like a Mackey Award like level guy, like a smaller school in D1 that ended up being like a huge producer. But that's kind of what I see as the future. But he's a guy I think you definitely take a shot on. But Jimmy, I want to thank you again so much for being with me to hear all of my ramblings of thoughts of all of these guys. It's been just awesome talking to you, man. And I hope that everyone there enjoyed the running backs, wide receivers, tight ends. We got the skill guys out of the way, Jimmy. And even though that it feels good to get it done, like I feel sad, like that this is like the fun part is over, but then Next, we've got offensive and defensive linemen, ending with linebackers and safeties and defensive backs right before the NFL draft. So, are there any parting thoughts that you have, Jimmy, about this skill class, about the running backs, wide receivers, tight ends? Who's your favorite? Just anything you want to say before we hop off of here.
As we talked about in the previous episode with quarterbacks, that the draft itself is not a great draft class, but when you look at the individuals, the skill players at least, there's so many solid guys. It's not the top end like last year where we had all those great wide receivers go off the board early in the draft. But the I feel like day two of this draft almost is going to be to me more interesting to see where all these guys go than day one. Obviously, day one gets all the hype and all that, but there's so many solid prospects that are like ranked 25 to 50 in this draft that it's incredible. And the more you go into it and dive into the draft, you're like, dang, that's another one. Okay, well, there's another one. Well, I got to put him in my top five. And the more you go through it, like 1 and 2 at each position may not be that great, but 5 through 10 at all these positions is incredible.
The depth of this skill class is definitely a backbone of this draft, like one of the backbones. It's the wide receiver or the
Yeah.
wide receivers, running backs until round five. You're gonna like I guarantee you, Jimmy, the team that takes the offensive or defensive lineman in round one and comes back to get running backs or receivers around two or three. Those are the teams that are going to get the A+ grades from
Yeah.
all of the websites and stuff that you're going to see because they'll say, well, they took a this guy caliber when usually it's always about the best players to me. It doesn't matter exactly where you get them, just get the best players in the draft. But we'll definitely be seeing that. But Jimmy, thank you so much again for joining me. I hope you had fun. I hope you listening had
Well,
fun
it's been fun.
and that we're going to get back right to it here in a couple of days. And we are going to do offensive linemen and defensive linemen. But for Jimmy Phillips and Angelo Carriero, I will see you next time for our NFL Draft 2025 NFL Draft mini series.